Amanda from Pontes Books here with the chapter 33 historical tidbit for The Prince and the Pauper. So today's historical tidbit was surprisingly hard to find information on. I thought it was going to be a little bit easier just because it kind of seemed like a more established thing based on how they talked about it in the story, but it was a little trickier. So what we are looking at for the historical tidbit for today is the King's Ward. Okay, so at the end of the story, Tom becomes a ward of the king. So I was like, I mean, you can kind of figure out from context clues what it means in the story, but I wanted to know, what does it mean in history, in real life? So here's the reference from The Prince and the Pauper. And for that he hath been a king. It is meet that other than common observance shall be his due. Wherefore note this his dress of state, for by it he shall be known, and none shall copy it. And wheresoever he shall come, it shall remind the people that he hath been royal in his time, and none shall deny him his due of reverence, or fail to give him salutation. He hath the throne's protection, he hath the crown's support, he shall be known and called by the honorable title of the King's Ward. So I don't know if like that full title, like the King's Ward, was officially like a title that would be given to anyone, but there is such a thing as wardship, and it was connected to the king, and even before Henry VIII. So that's what I kind of dove into a little bit here. So a little bit of a history of wardship. So basically in feudal law, in feudal times, this is when it all like came to be. So when there were like lords of that had property, and they had tenants that were kind of like living on their property, but it was still kind of their property, but they weren't necessarily even like kings or queens, but the same idea, right? Like someone who is like the ruler. So this having a wardship allowed the monarch or the lord to take control of a minor heir until they came of age, in the case of a tenant, so their parent dying. So that like at its very core is basically what is happening in these times. So they own property that is under the control of the lord. So that person dies, that property owner, and in order to basically protect, or supposedly this is why it was all started in the first place, protect that minor heir or the widow from relatives wanting to kind of get that property and take advantage of the situation, the lord or the king or whatever would take that person under their wing, so to speak, and have them be their ward until they came of age, and then they could take over kind of that property. So I don't know the intricate details of the whole system, but basically how Henry VIII specifically came into this, or how Tudor times kind of tie into this, is that Henry VIII did establish what was called a court of wards and liveries. And apparently this had to do with administering like the dues that were owed to the king, again, somehow related to this property, and that there was payment coming in. I'm not exactly sure the details, but there was a connection here. I didn't see anything in particular that talked a whole lot about, wards that was like a title that someone earned, that then the king would like take them in and take care of them. And I am by no means a historian, so it might be out there, but I didn't see anything that was kind of this particular situation where someone did something that pleased the king, and as a result was granted this title of ward. It seemed like it was something more, that it was like if someone died and there was a minor involved, that they would be become a ward of the king or a lord or whatever. So there's a little bit more information on kind of modern day wards. So if you're looking up the term, you'll find a lot more information about modern day wards. So in law, this is an official legal term. So a ward is someone who's either a minor or an incapacitated adult. So someone who's unable to, technically care for themselves or make decisions, sound decisions, they can be placed under the protection of a legal guardian or a government entity. So you can be a ward of a person. So I think of like guardianships. So if you've ever read Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or know about Britney Spears and how she was under a guardianship for a while. So there's kind of been in current events somewhat. So I, think of it like that it's somebody being under kind of someone else's care, or a government entity. And so that could be, you could be a ward of the state, or you could be a ward of the court. Those are kind of the most often phrases that you hear used. Also, children in foster care are considered wards of the state, whatever the state is where they reside. And because until they are, legally adopted, they don't have a guardian. So they are wards of the state. Also, for a time in history, Native people in the US were considered wards of the state. However, this ended in 1871, and hopefully it was never a thing after that at all. Some more information, kind of more modern day. There is what's called the Child Act of 1989. So the wardship jurisdiction where someone is taken, like becomes a ward of somebody else, supposedly is only used in very rare circumstances. Like this isn't a common thing. But one of the advantages of it is that it can take effect immediately. So like as soon as it's decided, it's immediate right then and there. So there's a couple situations where something like this could be necessary to make someone a ward of the court immediately. So if a child requires emergency medical treatment, if they're under threat of a forced marriage, or if they're at risk of parental child abduction, for example. So basically, if their current guardian or parent is putting them in danger and they need to step in and the court needs to kind of like take guardianship of them in order to get them out of that threat, that can happen immediately. So that's a little bit of something about wards, both past and present. So hopefully you learned something. Have a good rest of your day.